Hi, Sudis. How are you doing? Welcome to Nuance. Thank you so much for the support. Hope you all are doing great. So, I came across this very beautiful black young lady who actually came up to say that Arabic is a colonizer's language, right? And this did not sit well with some people, especially Arabs, right? And the next I heard was like, I mean, this is like, what black people use against or victims of genocide today. And I am like, which victims of genocide? So you mean that we are trying to like, uh, shade probably the Palestinians that we do not know the difference between the Levantine Arabs and the Gulf Arabs of the Gulf, right? And she said like she is kind of very sick of the topic and so sick of hearing things like this because we always look for a way to like, bring something like this, probably use it against them. And I am going to ask this. Did this young lady in any way lie? The truth is that we don't talk enough about how colonizers Arabs are and how they played a huge part when it comes to racism. So when it comes to slavery, and if you look around, most of the countries that are having crisis to this very moment, you definitely will still find them. They are looking for a way to live. Like the one they did is not enough for them because it can never be enough for them. And now we are talking about Arabs and the things they have done. Some people are looking for a way to pull themselves out of it. Why? Because we are talking about how colonizers of people they are. We are not saying anything as beautiful or glamorous as they want it to be. Let's get into this video.
Arabic is also a colonizer's language, and I'm surprised that this is a controversial topic. Colonizer's language is a language that is imposed on the indigenous people, often replacing or marginalizing their own indigenous languages. Arabic became a widely spoken language, and Islam became a widely practiced religion, similar to the way that English has become a widely spoken language and Christianity has become a widely practiced religion, due to colonization, empire building, and slavery. About the 7th century, the Arab Muslim Empire started to grow. Arab armies began to take over places in the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe. Now, the places that were conquered would then often take Arabic as the language of stuff like the administration, education, etc. It would become the language of the elites. Now, this would happen in different ways in different places. In some places, like in North Africa, the Amazigh language was deliberately suppressed. In other places where Islam was taken up voluntarily, it became a language tied to religion and faith, and therefore more of a sacred and treasured language rather than language imposed on the native people. So criticizing people for speaking English or speaking French instead of their native languages while you're speaking Arabic is a very bold thing to do. Arabic is also a colonizer's language, and I'm surprised that this is a
It's only controversial because this rhetoric is being weaponized against victims of a genocide today by people who don't know the difference between the Levantine Arabs and Arabs of the Gulf. I'm just so sick of this topic, and I'm so sick of seeing comments like, they're not ready to hear this. Who's they? The people who Arabized, or if you want to call it colonized, the Middle East and North Africa are the Gulf Arabs. So people from what today is known as Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, that part of the world. But for some reason, this topic keeps coming up when people bring up Arabs of the Levant who were Arabized themselves. So the Palestinian people and people in Lebanon and Syria are having this rhetoric thrown at them. Meanwhile, the people who were responsible for this colonization, Arabization, whatever you want to call it, are actually allies of the US. Time to clarify a couple of things because TikTok is having the best time putting words in my mouth over a video that's going viral where I stitched a creator's video who was saying that Arabic is a colonizer's language and she didn't know why it was controversial. I answered her question by saying it's only controversial because it's being weaponized to manufacture consent for a genocide that is happening today. By that, I mean it's not controversial where we are concerned, us, the Arabs of the Levant, who have learned all about the conquest and Arabization of North Africa and the Levant 1400 years ago. We study this in history classes. That is why it's not controversial to us, but what is controversial is how this rhetoric is being spun on social media. It's being spun in bad faith. I was triggered by the comments on Sabi's video, by the rampant Islamophobia, xenophobia, anti-Arab sentiment that was going unmoderated. That's what I meant when I said in red, no shade to this creator, but some Americans need to be reminded of this, that Arabs are not a monolith, that the people in Palestine today had nothing to do with what happened in Africa 1400 years ago. That does not mean I'm undermining the historical exploitation of communities in Africa, nor does it mean that I am denying the current exploitation by Arab countries in the Levant and in the Gulf. I'm someone who has been speaking out about the kafala system for most of my life. The only reason why I'm not more active in that space is because I haven't lived in Lebanon in 20 years. I live in Australia. If you have a look at my profile, you'll see the multiple flags in my bio, and that is because I've been speaking out about these silent genocides, about the exploitation of the people of Sudan and Congo by Arab countries who are allies of the US. I said no to a lucrative career opportunity in the UAE because I don't want to be living in countries that are funding what's happening in Sudan and in the Congo. So for people to come on here and say that I am undermining the experience of people of North Africa and East Africa, that is just cooked. The only reason why I speak Arabic today as a first language and not Aramaic is the same reason why the Amazigh don't speak their native languages anymore. It's because our communities have also been Arabized and conquered. So you'll never find me denying that historical fact. Also, I'm a researcher by trade. Like, it would be crazy for me to deny that any of this happened. I specifically said this topic is only controversial because it's being used in bad faith today and not on its own merit. Because if you've looked at any of my content or my profile, you would have seen what I stand for. And I don't know why I'm explaining myself to a bunch of kids who have lived in the West their whole lives. But here we are. Free Palestine, free Congo, free Sudan, free Haiti, free the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island and Australia, and fuck the West.
Arabic is also a colonizer's language, and I'm surprised that this is
It's only controversial because this rhetoric is being weaponized against the victims of a genocide today by people who don't know the difference between the Levantine Arabs and Arabs of the Gulf. I'm just so sick of this topic, and I'm so sick of seeing comments like, they're not ready to hear this. Who's they?
European colonizers aid when they invented white supremacy because it prevents us from having legitimate conversations, causing the victims of the victims of the victims of oppressive institutions to not be able to advocate for themselves because white supremacists are going to use that and weaponize it against another marginalized group. First creator Sabi's News says that Arabic is a colonizer's language. I agree that trying to conflate modern-day European colonialism to the Arab conquest of North Africa, Eastern Africa, and other areas is anachronistic and problematic because there are key differences. That said, people use that nuance to then completely undermine the harm that was caused via the Arab conquest and via the slave trait that still persists to this day. I hosted a group trip to Morocco, and our tour guide was Amazigh, and he had one boundary. He was hee-heeing and ha-haing with us the entire time, but had one boundary: don't call him Arab. He was so against it because he's Amazigh, and he's experienced the erasure of his identity by the state's pursuit of Arabization. The genocide in Sudan today, that is really an extension of the genocide in Darfur, also has to do with Arab supremacy. It's just one factor, but it is a factor, and that can't be separated from the years of history. That undermining is what's being done in the second creator's comments, and that creator even goes on to say that we shouldn't be discussing this because it's going to be weaponized by Zionists against Palestinians, stating over and over this video does not exist in a vacuum, including accusing that first creator of doing something that she's not doing at all. This is not what's going on in her comments. So when a Zionist tries to come and say, thank you, Sabi's News says Palestinians speaking Arabic doesn't entitle you to their homes or their lands, and the mental AP2 trying to get there is mad. She's also made a lot of content being extremely and vocally anti-Zionist and pro-Palestinian. What I gather is going on is something that I've been talking about for months now and been getting so much hate for it, which is just that people are unable to sit with the nuances of two disturbing realities being true at the same time. The desire for perfect victims is causing really, really important conversations to devolve into, hey, don't talk about this right now. And listen, I don't necessarily disagree that certain conversations shouldn't be had around certain people. Like, I've made the point that white men who discuss the Arab conquest, I always give them a little side eye because I'm like, I don't think you're doing that in good faith. I don't think that you actually care. I think that you want to demonize Arabs and Muslims. And oftentimes, 9 out of 10 times, that's what they're doing. But Sabi's News is a Black creator who talks specifically about African news, Black news, and has also discussed something that many pro-Palestine creators have not touched one bit: the effects of the kafala system on Black migrant workers in Lebanon under Israeli bombs. Because again, if we're protesting against Israeli bombs, why have the plight of the Black migrant workers gone completely unaddressed? I would say the conversation about Arab supremacy is one that shouldn't be had at this time if this wasn't taking place in Lebanon. But just because the kafala system exists in Lebanon does not mean that Lebanese people deserve to die under Israeli bombs. That is a point I have made over and over and over again, which is why I reject the premise of making videos about, hey, Palestinians aren't actually homophobic, because it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter one bit, because the one instance of a Palestinian showing homophobia will be used now to counteract that argument because you've given it legitimacy. Here's a video of me explaining why our desire for perfect victims is always going to harm the most marginalized of the most marginalized of the most marginalized. Those are Black migrant workers who are literally the victims of imperialism. This is a whole entire enslaved population of people. I finally realized how people are refusing to touch on this because people want perfect victims. I've talked at length at how dangerous it is to deify Palestinians when talking about their suffering, because that is a form of dehumanization. Now we're talking about Lebanon here, and it's the same phenomenon as well. And the people coming out the woodwork saying that Lebanese people are the most kind, most hospitable people ever and they don't deserve to be bombed, I've always maintained that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're unkind or inhospitable. They still don't deserve to be bombed. But that desire for perfect victims is what's causing people to be unable to call out how the kafala system disproportionately harms Black migrant workers. It disrupts this notion of a perfect victim. So now we have the victims of the victims being completely ignored. And this dynamic is exactly why I believe that white Western colonizers ate when they chose Israel to be their pet project. It's very difficult to have conversations about your struggles when your oppressor is also oppressed. That sums up the entire discourse that's been taking place on this app for the last few months. From Black Americans are colonizers to Arabic as a colonizing language. That's what even makes talking about Palestine so difficult for some people, because they simply cannot conceive of a situation in which a Jewish state full of people who have been so thoroughly oppressed can be so oppressive itself. It also makes people who have not been able to undo their anti-Semitism be a complete liability in the conversation, because they let their anti-Semitism fly and then ruins the conversation for everybody else who's trying to be principled and say, hey, we're anti-Zionist, not anti-Semitic, like, please get with the program. Same dynamic as when Zionists use the whole there are no human rights in Palestine talking point to play on people's fears about the savage, barbaric Arabs. The irony being that they're using human rights talking points to justify bombing Arab people, because they know that people hate Arab people more than they love human rights. Same thing happens when non-Black people who haven't undone their anti-Blackness try to criticize Black imperialism, Black capitalism, and they do it in a way that makes it so clear that they are also anti-Black. Now the entire conversation is derailed, which is exactly why Empire has been using Black people to do its bidding, because it knows that a lot of people just really hate Black people, and they'll allow that to get in the way of a proper critique. Before you go, check out the link in my bio for a scholarship for HBCU students to get education funding for the next 4 years. I always have to plug something important at the end of a video that I feel like is going to get a lot of attention. Awareness for this scholarship is something that I'm working on with the Future of STEM Scholars Initiative, so you guys are going to see me plug it a couple more times, and I'm not sorry about that. 40K in funding, you have to be a STEM major, going to an HBCU, link in bio to apply. Deadline is January 31st, so go. When Black people talk about anti-Black racism that we faced in the Swana region, and we're met with comments that say things like, we don't want outsiders to handle this topic, I get really confused because I'm like, oh, do you even know who you're saying that to? You don't know my lived experience. My lived experience is one of extreme racism that I've faced, but I will never ever talk about it publicly and never go into the details of it because I know it's going to be weaponized. I'll talk about the overarching themes, but I'll never discuss the actual details. So when you say things like you don't want outsiders to handle the topic, are you telling us that we shouldn't talk about our experience? Because I've had a nuanced experience in the Swana region, so what do you want me to do about the experience that I've had? Especially when I already choose to self-censure because I know exactly how white supremacists and bad faith actors take that kind of information. I also travel a lot, and I talk about the importance of framing certain narratives about countries in very, very careful ways. So for example, when I was in Morocco recently and my phone got stolen, I talked about the importance of decolonizing our understanding of safety so as not to demonize Morocco or, write it off as like a shithole country, which is what people do when things like that happen to them in the Swana region or in countries that are outside of the West. So again, how do you think that we should handle these conversations? Because I've seen a lot of your comments just basically pushing back and not being willing to listen to anything I'm saying because I'm an outsider, but I'm telling you that I've had firsthand experience of what I'm discussing. So now what? Shameless plug, if you're interested in conversations about traveling mindfully and ethically, etc., and reflections on these kinds of topics, follow me over on Instagram at joy.malonza or over on my Of Aesthetic Joys channel, which I've tagged below. And please don't try to tell me not to travel to the Swana region if I'm going to talk about the racism I face there, because anti-Blackness is global and I face racism literally everywhere. So where do you want me to go if that's going to be your answer?
Arabic is also a colonizer's language, and I'm surprised that this is a controversy.
Because I don't think it's 100% true. And I think there is an argument that can be said that Arabic is an indigenous language in some of the regions in which it's spoken. Now, I'm not an Arabic speaker. I'm going to tag somebody who did a video on this a bit more detailed. But I also want to talk about a different aspect of this, which specifically that this is often a Zionist talking point. Now, I don't think the person who made this video is a Zionist shill or trying in any way to advance Zionist talking points, but it is one. And I think if you don't attack it with a certain amount of nuance, you may come out with a bad conclusion. The argument often offered by Zionists is that there was this Arab-Muslim conquest in the 7th century AD, which is true. And that just represents a number of turning over of, the owners and the occupiers of the land. And therefore, the Nakba is okay because, hey, it's just another person, doing their thing. And it's no different than the other ones. However, something happened after the conquest, which is that people went on living, they were forced to speak Arabic and adopt Islam, but that was 1,400 years ago. We're talking several dozens of generations of development. And as you can see here, this is a map of the Middle East or North Africa, and color-coded is the different dialects of Arabic that are spoken in those places. Again, I'm not an Arabic speaker, so if somebody who knows more than me wants to mount the floor with me in this explanation, I more than welcome it. However, my understanding is that a lot of these different regional dialects are distinct from each other, and in some cases, they are not mutually intelligible, which means that you can have a native speaker of Arabic from one place and a native speaker of Arabic from another place, and they would not necessarily be able to understand each other because the dialects would be that different. Which you have something called ethnogenesis, which is basically the process by which an ethnic group or ethnic identity is formed. Now, pictured here are Palestinian women who are sewing tatrees patterns into fabric. They are wearing traditional Palestinian dresses. I believe those are thobes. And you can see on here is Arabic is written on one of those pieces of fabric. According to the Introduction to Palestine, a Socialist Introduction, many of these patterns were distinct not just to Palestine, but to the individual villages in which people came from. So you may have somebody who went from Al-Quds, from Al-Khalil, from Gaza, from other places, and the distinct patterns that they had would be distinct, as would a lot of the foods that they had. They would be distinct. Now, what that means, at least to me, is that Arabic, to a certain extent, has become an indigenous language to a lot of these places. Definitely to Palestine, to Lebanon, to Iraq. A lot of these countries have their own distinct cultures, history, music, etc., that is very much wrapped in the language and has developed over hundreds and hundreds of years. A lot of these cultures and languages are under threat, by Western imperialist interests. Definitely in Palestine by Zionism. You could definitely say in Iraq in the 20th and 21st century. You could also say Algeria to a certain extent. And so I don't think you can say that Arabic is just a colonizer language. I also don't think you can say any language is a colonizer language, because languages are symbols and words with meaning. They aren't imbued with any specific moral character. You can say that the people who have used them, are colonizers, that have spoken those languages, and those languages were part of the mechanisms of imperialism and colonization. But yeah, I just don't think that's something that's really fair to say. And I do think it's actually controversial. I think it is controversial. I think it's actually more complicated than the original poster is making it out to be.
So this is all I got from this video, and the lady that started this conversation, it's absolutely amazing, because there are some things a lot of people have been shying away from. And it is when you try to let them know what they are doing or what the Arabs have done or are still doing. See, most times we talk about slavery in America, right? And other places. We actually do not talk a lot about Arab slavery, because all the time you try to raise that up, they start throwing tantrum, because they most times do not want to that part of them to be reviewed and all that. And that doesn't even change anything. The young lady, the beautiful young black lady, said what she said, and that is it. You are asking whom? Now it is that you all are all Arabs, or are you all not Arabs? Now it is time to talk about the atrocity that has been going on, especially in the eastern, west, like most part of Africa, right? And you all are looking for a way to dodge from it, or to run away from being called or from being mentioned, but you all are still the same. I understand that some Gulf countries are allies to America, right? But that does not excuse that Arabs have been on their own this, and they have been doing what they know how to do best. And she is also trying to educate us from the Gulf Arab and the Levante Sea. All these are not even like, I don't think these are what I am about to start checking right now, because when we call Arabs, we know who the Arabs are. And I am going to say this: are you not Arab? Are you not Arab? And most times when you try to correct, or when you try to mention some certain things, they look for a way to link it to Palestinians or what is going on in Palestine, saying that we are like that young lady is, yeah, according, you heard what the guy said, like it's always a Zionist rhetoric. I mean, like what they always use, but he doesn't feel like she is that. But that is 100% how the Zionists try to talk to them, or like how they speak to them about some certain things. This got nothing to do with Zionists and all that, because as you can see her pictures and all that. She got nothing to do with majority of the people. Even tag and okay, that stitched the video are kind of a pro-police, but at some point, everybody are just withdrawing because of the tantrum you all started throwing, because all of a sudden black people became the villain, and you all are the amazing people. But that is just okay. But yeah, you already need to look down, deep down, sit down and introspect on some certain thing that has been going on, right? Because sometimes some people think that they are the, how do I say this? That it is like they only need to be saved, and the rest of the people are not are not included, right? Like save only us, because from what started the whole back and forth, black people and Palestinians, was because it was like, you have to save us first. You don't have to, you are not supposed to be the first. We should be the first in your agenda and all that, and no other person. That is to tell you that, whatever that is going on, or maybe the genocide that is going on all over places, Sudan, Haiti, and all that, they are the most important one. But I am going to say this: there is no genocide that is more important. I think this is where I am going to draw the curtain. Thank you so much, and see you all in my next video. Bye for now.